Well, today it's a true pleasure to meet with Jose M. Olvera Fernandez. And Jose and I go back. He played for me for 4 years, and before that, he was in middle school and would come and hang out in my classroom at lunch. And he and his buddies, and I've really enjoyed getting to build a relationship with Jose. I was just telling him it's been a little too long since we've had a chance to talk, so we need to connect more. But Jose right now works for GLY Construction and local Union 242. So I'm proud of all the hard work. You've always had a great work ethic, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So as we jump into this, I like to start out with my guest giving their background story, talking about themselves, and then if they feel like it's necessary, they can talk about parents and grandparents and how race has impacted their life and maybe racism as well.
Well, where to begin? I mean, I'm a local. I was born in Stanwood, born and raised in Stanwood at first. I was there for about the first 8 years of my life before we moved over to Lakewood Commons, which ended up being my area for when I would go to school. And from there, I just stayed a life for Lakewood, at least to me. From third grade on, that Lakewood was my home. Even when I moved to Everett when I was around 15, I still wanted to make the trek over to my school. So some of the people that recognize me and know me would occasionally see me walking down the streets of Everett to get to school all the way in Lakewood, because that was my home. And I got to say, that community built me to who I am today. That's where I met my fiance, who just recently got home. Is about to start cooking up. And
hi, Ashley.
Hello.
She says hello.
One of my former students too.
There you go. But I mean, that's where I was born and raised around. But for race, I mean, race was very prevalent to me at a young age. I found out what I was really early on because there was a giant differential as soon as I hit preschool. The teacher that unfortunately looked after me and a bunch of other kids in my classroom always made a point to make race an issue. And one of the memories I always remember to this day is her like screaming at me and my cousin at the time, who was in my class, saying, "These little spics don't know what's going on." And it was a rough time. I mean, we were kids hearing that for the first time, and I remember asking my dad, "What does spick mean?" And he just kind of told me it's a derogatory term. From there on out, I was like, okay, so there's a difference. And it wasn't just her saying it. It was always obvious with some of my peers. They would always make references to the way we sounded, the way we spoke, the way we even sometimes brought our lunches over. I mean, race kind of never left my mind. Race was always a part of my identity, and I always made sure to make that a well-known fact about myself, that I was proud of it. Because for most of my time growing up in Stanwood, it was always a prevalent thing to be noticed about me and amongst my peers as well, because around the early 90s, we were just influencing and influxing into the state. I think around Washington State, we started seeing a huge influx of immigrants come in around the early 90s, if I'm not mistaken. And I've only seen the community grow. I mean, thankfully. I mean, you've seen it too grow, Teeter, as well. I mean, you're pretty sure you saw how much Lakewood's probably grown with color as you've seen the time pass by, especially with me and everyone else that's come through. I mean, it's been a blessing to see it grow and not stop.
Yeah.
And I have to say that when I reached high school, it kind of died down for me. Not as much, but it died down. It no longer was as oppressing thing to, finger in your face saying this is what you are.
What do you think you can attribute that to? Anything in particular?
The community. I mean, the football community I joined. I mean, your program, the program that you built with everyone in your staff. I was thankful to be surrounded by people that made everything about the sport, made everything about being included and making sure we weren't putting each other down, because especially you, when we were younger, you would always make sure that we weren't insulting each other, and you made community a big thing for you. And that to me felt inclusive. And whenever we mentioned things about race, you would never shy away. You wouldn't make things weird. You wouldn't be demeaning about it. You would encourage it. And it was one of the things I always loved being in your class, because I would say the most outlandish things and you just kind of go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hilarious to look back on it because I had a lot of freedom of expression. And I didn't feel like I had to restrain myself for who I was growing up, especially. So.
Well, that's very encouraging to hear. So thank you. You also mentioned that you made it a point of pride. I can very clearly remember, car washes and a couple of other times, maybe even if we were we didn't do a lot of conditioning, but lines across the field if there was some discipline. And I can remember the chants you would start. Si se puede, si se puede, right?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. And it was infectious, and your teammates embraced it. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Oh yeah, we started a lot of chants back then.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that was some memories.
Yeah.
But it was definitely encouraging because it was just different, especially with the community I grew up in.
Yeah.
Because I got to experience who I really was and not shy.
Right.
And I'm very proud of that. I'm very happy about that. And it helped develop me later on in life to enlighten people about certain things that do happen. Even with my significant other, she didn't realize that there was that many disparities that happened, or that there was always second looks or second judgments with even her and I being a biracial couple. Because there's always judgments. I mean, everyone always has a judgment of some sort, but in some cases it would be uncomfortable. Right. You could see an underlying tone with people's just attitudes and ways of talking to you. But as we've grown as a couple, she's grown to understand me a lot more and where I come from and some of the cultural differences that we had, and especially as we met. Because the background I grew up in was a little more, it was different. It wasn't as comfortable as hers was. I can say I had a different upbringing completely, especially looking at the way our parents parented one another. I mean, I look at her family and I'm impressed with the way they handled her, and they made her grow up as an adult. Versus me, where our upbringing was a little more rough. I started working when I was 8, in the fields. I had to start earning my money early. I didn't get to be parented. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I ended up having to do a lot more than most kids my age would have to do. By the time I was in high school, I already had 3 jobs, balancing between working early in the morning as a janitor, as you may remember, because I couldn't make some practices, to later on getting off and going back to the mall, and then later on at night doing side work with whoever I could find side work with, which would be demoing things, going out and doing yard work for somebody, whatever I could bring in, because early on I had a responsibility to attend to my family. And for me, the main pride I had was hustle, because we had to hustle. If I didn't hustle, I wouldn't be making the money I needed to come and bring it home to give to my mom and to support. And there was a lot that just happened. I mean, we didn't have a very good structure as I grew up, and I saw that it was very prevalent. I didn't have a structure growing up.
Yeah. And
I created my own structure as I went on. And that's one thing that I can say is it was definitely an immigrant standpoint, because I come from an immigrant background. And my story isn't just to one person that's Mexican. It's to many other immigrants that come to this country, be they Nigerian, Somalian, which one of my family friends are Somalian. Known them since I was 10 years old. They're a part of my family. And now this whole situation with what happened with George Floyd and all that's in their camp. And so when everything happened with George Floyd, I was up there in those marches, screaming out what I needed to scream out, and help out the community that raised me along with them. And the Black community has always been there for me. It's been my second upbringing.
Do you see being a person of color, is there kind of just a greater understanding from other people of color, whether, like you said, it's African American or other groups, than you would get from the white community, because there's that maybe. Yeah. Is there a greater connection there, do you think, or greater understanding of each other? Likely,
because with people of color, I didn't feel like I had to restrain my vocabulary. Mm-hmm. With people of color, I could say what I wanted to say. It's a little more, graphic, to say the least. Mm-hmm. But even then, I understand that certain cultural backgrounds kind of prevent that. For the most part, it was a better sense of camaraderie, because we all kind of felt the struggle of growing up in this country, kind of, oppressed to a degree. Mm. And especially with the Black community, I felt that a lot more, because being immigrant, you always have to hustle for your money. And there was always this, boss man that would be completely racist towards us. Mm. And it was just kind of the way it worked. And sometimes you didn't question it. You just kind of went through the motions of it, especially when they'd start yelling at things across the fields, telling you these dirty beaners need to hurry up, or just obscenities being yelled at us. And we just kind of got used to it. And it's the same with the African American community. They went through the same thing, getting yelled obscenities and having to shrug it off. Keep pushing on. You got to keep making your bread, because the moment you flip, you look like the animal. You look like the one that just snaps because you retaliated to someone's words. And that's one of the things I grew up with in school was, you're big, you're brown, you're intimidating. Don't say anything. Don't retaliate. And when you're told constantly at a young age, don't retaliate, be the bigger person, it's like putting a lid on a cap that's about to explode. Because you're constantly being told you need to be the bigger person, which, granted, it's, in the end of the day, in all humble and wisdomness, you need to do that, but it felt targeted more towards us than anything. Mm-hmm.
Is there any healthy releases or healthy ways that you have found to deal with that?
Definitely. I found football. I found a physical sport that helped me take it out. Mm-hmm. If I couldn't say something, well, the guy in front of me is going to feel all my pain. And I think for a lot of us, sports and other activities helped us navigate that energy in a better place versus doing, whatever atrocities came our way. Mm-hmm. For some of us, it kind of fell in lieu with, alcoholism, drugs, or whatever it may be, which thankfully I didn't fall into at our community. Mm-hmm. And I made sure no one saw any of that in my community from me.
Yeah.
So.
What are some unique ways specifically for, you can be as specific as Mexican or Hispanics in a little broader sense. What are some specific ways that you may have to deal in your community with either overt racism or systemic or kind of underlying racism?
Well, it's different because in Washington State, it doesn't feel as prevalent. Right? It's more prevalent down when you go to the Midwest states and further east, because that's where it stems from, hence systemic racism. You have to have the nucleus of it somewhere, and it all started all on the east side. So when you get more towards the west side, it's a little different. It's a little more undertoned over here. And as far as systemically, there's always been opportunity for me, and I haven't seen an issue with opportunity. At least from my perspective.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. It's difficult to find an answer for that, because I had a different experience with it. I got lucky and, was raised around here and wasn't limited to as other peers who I know who came from down south that were completely limited, that still have segregated, areas that they don't say openly, but it's kind of a known fact through word of mouth. Mm-hmm. So it's a little different for the state of Washington, I'd say.
So you feel like it's either gotten better or maybe just in this area it never was quite as bad. So okay.
It never was quite as bad. The communities around here kind of reacted as best they could, because this state has been progressive for the most part. Mm-hmm. I mean, historically, it's been more democratic than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always been more of a safe haven for a lot of immigrants, I would believe and would say.
Okay, well, even immigrants, whether they cross legally or illegally, you know, there's sanctuary cities and so forth, from
Yeah.
San Francisco to Seattle and so forth. So
Yeah.
that would provide, you know, more of the sanctuary there, correct?
Yeah. In opposition to like Nevada, whereas state of Nevada or Arizona, it's heavy there.
Mm.
I mean, they mandated a law that lets you basically bias anyone that they see and say, where are your papers? Where are they at? And it targets the bigger community, which is Hispanics. And I had family that went through that recently, and it was just horrendous to hear about it. And I won't say my family's name because I'm pretty sure it's not my business to state their business out there, but they went through a traumatic experience having to go through all that. And they've been nothing but law-abiding citizens that all I've known.
Right.
You hear stories like that where ICE comes in and they detain you, or people in Arizona get detained just from walking down the street doing what they're doing on a daily basis. And that's the kind of stuff that makes it hard to swallow. You know,
so we look back at World War II times, and we had internment camps just because people are Japanese, right, on the West
Correct.
Coast. You said you're born in Stanwood, American. Yet, how much focus have you had of people just kind of maybe assuming or wondering on your legal status, and speak to that as being maybe racist?
Well, for me, because of my size, that was abnormally different. I didn't get a lot of Hispanic. I got a lot of Samoan. So for me, it was never a question. But for my sisters, oh yeah. For my friends, oh yeah. There would always be a question. There would always be a look and a suspicion. But another thing that would be a dead giveaway is my name, because as soon as you hear the name Jose, you're like, that ain't Pacific Islander. That's a Hispanic name. And that's where the judgments would come too, is because as soon as you hear, you know, the different vernacular, you start realizing certain things are a little different. But it's hard to say for that, though. I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. What would you like to share, maybe just to the white community in general, something, if you could just send a message, what would it be?
Well, it's a good question. It's hard to say. Be open to different ideas, because for a lot of the community that I know, and I've hung around most of my life, they tend to think it's us against them when it's not really the case. It's never been, for example, right now the biggest issue is Black Lives Matter. It's not just about Black lives, it's about the situation that's at hand. There's systemic racism, there's complete injustice that's going on. There's still biases that go around from people walking down the street, from a simple arrest. It's not about you as a person or you as a community. It's about an issue that's going on with another community that needs to be brought to its attention, given light, expanded on, and fixed. And it's the same thing with kids that are going through the issue with ICE right now, with refugees being locked up. It's not a matter of we matter more. It's a matter of we have an issue. We want it to be brought to that attention to that community, and we would like help. And all it is just understanding, which is what you're doing right now. Bringing conversations up, realizing that there's always been issues and there's always been underlying issues, but now it's being recorded by most people and they're starting to realize, oh, there's always been an issue. Because most of the time you go about your life not thinking that there's something going on. Most of the time you go about your life thinking everything's fine and dandy and there's no issues until something snaps and you realize what we've been doing has been wrong the entire time. So you mentioned that it's not that our lives matter more, right? But that they matter. So why is it offensive when somebody says all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter? Can you touch on that in your opinion? Oh yeah, I mean, it's like saying all breast cancer matters. I mean, you're trying to bring awareness to one situation at the moment. You're trying to bring awareness to this moment. It obliterates what's going on. It's like you're trying to, hide under the table what's really going on. You're trying to just brush it off like it's not a big problem. And that's one of the things that becomes an issue, is that when you start to neglect what's going on, because at that point it closes the conversation. You're no longer having an open avenue of discussion. You're just closing it off entirely right there. You decided you don't want to be a part of the conversation and you don't want to help. That's the biggest issue. I see people saying that all lives matter, all this matters. It's like, no, we're talking about this specific issue. Don't try to close a conversation now because you feel uncomfortable or you feel attacked. That's not the case. Part of being an adult is having an open discussion and being able to be comfortable about talking about the whole situation versus whatever you feel is right.
So I just kind of got this mental picture as you're talking of, you mentioned earlier, it's kind of in the dark or something, you don't really talk about. It's kind of like if there's this injustice that's happening to the people of color.
Yes.
And bad things happen to white people and so forth too, but maybe not specifically because of their skin, right? And so when you basically have just shined a spotlight to say, hey, look what's happening here. And then somebody tries to flip on the light and say, well, it's everybody matters, right? But you're specifically pointing out what's in the darkness of a group who's been mistreated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it may happen, and the same injustice may happen, but at what frequency is it happening at? That's where it becomes alarming. You know what I mean? Like, it's the motive that goes behind it. Right.
What are some ideas that you have that might improve things in our country? It could be legislative ideas, laws. It could be community ideas, or from education or churches or whatever you think, ideas to make things better.
See, that's kind of difficult. I feel like there's someone that's more well-equipped for that kind of answer than I am. I just know and have observed what's going on around my community in my lifetime, but I wouldn't know what the right fix would be, because it boils down to a systemic issue. It boils down to years of having a thought process you need to have. I mean, the biggest thing I could say is just education, not shying away from our history, not shying away from what we really know. At the basis of it all is education. Because if you try to shy away from what happened in this country, you blind other people from knowing it. I mean, I know in certain states in the Midwest, they don't touch on certain subjects as much as they should be, or issues like the NAFTA deal, which you probably know of because you're a history teacher. It's things that you need to expand on that say, well, okay, this happened, and what's the issues that were caused afterwards? You know what I'm saying? Like for immigrants, the NAFTA deal brought a huge wave of immigrants because of what happened with America and Mexico. You see a giant wave of immigrants now coming in because labor's been reduced. You don't get the same opportunities anymore because you're now basically outsourcing your work. And it creates disparities in your community. Honestly, history is the biggest teacher.
Yep.
And if I could say anything, we need to expand more just simply on education.
Okay, great. Who has been somebody in your life that has kind of just been a mentor and maybe helped you through those rough times?
A tribe of people. I haven't had a single mentor, as you know. I had my community. I didn't just rely on one person. I had you. I had my whole group of friends, Brandon and Raphael, my mother, my sisters, friends I met along the way, people I had met and disconnected with, and a lot of books. I read a lot. Thankfully, I was blessed with the thought of having to actually pick up a book and have my own thoughts and conceive my own notions and be able to come up with my own solutions. I mean, I haven't had a single mentor. I've had many people that have taught me along the way and have built me to who I am today.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of friends, Rafe and Brandon. You guys are like the three amigos, right? Like you guys are together all the time. And I just so enjoyed watching you guys. And I thought that friendship in itself was such a great testament to the rest of our school and community. You know, we have a couple of Hispanics and a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy that, you know, just were best of buds and still maintain that friendship today. And I thought that was really, it really brought encouragement to me. And instead of people just kind of keeping separate and going their separate ways. So that, I've really loved that relationship there.
It's great because, I mean, there's a bunch of other people that in our school that you probably might remember or not, but people like Jarrell as well. I don't know if you remember Jarrell Huff.
Yeah.
Or Brittany Foote, or any of these other people that we had in our own little clique that we created. We decided to make a hodgepodge of people from different groups because we felt like we all had a voice of some sort. We were all prideful of who we were, and we needed to represent that as hard as we could at any event we were at. And to the this misfortune of a lot of other students, we were the loudest groups always there. But we brought a lot of flavor to the community. I mean, we had fun. We made sure not to be square, I guess you could say. We were always very rounded in the way we presented ourselves.
Yeah. What gives you the greatest hope moving into the future?
I have to say just the community's growing amongst one another. I mean, point blank, we're multiplying. You know, the lady I'm with right now is white. She's going to have my kids. There's nothing more I can say to that. At the end of the day, it's only going to become more of a melting pot. Things will change, and change is slow, but it will come. I mean, even right now in the United States, Spanish is damn near the second language. I mean, the writing's on the wall, I believe. And it's coming. For those who don't want it, it's coming. And there's going to be a giant change in the next 20 years, I believe.
What resources are there resources that you have? It could be like a video from YouTube or something you think is really important, or books. If you have those, and you may not have to think of them right now, you can send them to me and I'll put them on your video link later. But if there's something you just really would like somebody to read or view, can you think of something off the top of your head?
Some of the people that are coming to my mind right now are very graphical people. A lot of artists that say a lot of abrupt and startling things at first, but when you peel down the messages, it reveals a greater message. And I don't know if I should say their names because I know there's.
This is your time to talk. This is not mine.
For me, one of the biggest artists I was really influenced by was Immortal Technique. He expounded on a lot of topics that I didn't really think about until I listened to him, and opened up a different perspective. And I think that's one of the biggest guys. Another guy that I listened to a lot previously when I was younger too was, I forgot his name. It was a lot of Mexican music, Mexican rock, and it was called Molotov. And they really expanded on what's going on with the United States and Mexico, especially when oil prices were being dropped and Mexico was doing what it could to get an appeal to America with our crude oil at the time. So there was, man, it's hard to say because I'm on the spot and I can't think of everything. But so far, those two artists kind of really come to mind: Immortal Technique and Molotov. Okay.
We'll go two more things and then we'll sign off here. You're the youngest person I've had on the show. Every other person I've interviewed has been, 30s and beyond. What are some things maybe from a young person's perspective that you would like to share? And then after you touch on that, coming from the younger age bracket, I'll let you just have any last words, something maybe that you didn't get a chance to talk about that you want to, and you can kind of bring us to a close.
Okay. For someone my age, kind of hard to say. I mean, I don't know really what to say. It's something to really ponder. Because as young as I am, I had to grow up really fast. So a lot of the things I have with my age group, I don't really understand sometimes. And not really understand. That's the wrong thing to say. It's... really it as easily wouldn't be the one. Sorry, I'm talking to my fiance. I don't know. From my perspective, it's
so let me throw this out, and it might spur on something here. Part of my reasoning for selecting older people has been life experience and seeing more throughout the course of their life and seeing the change of how race has played out in America. And then, so maybe personal life experience and educational experience and so forth. How important is it for young people today to dive into the education to understand what's happening, whether it's with their people group or just the country?
See, now that brings a different topic, because age really does help.
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of experience from that. And being as young as we are, for the most part, some people didn't grow up like I did. They didn't have to see almost as much as I did.
Mm-hmm.
I got a life course lesson early on to see what adulthood was like for most people, and realizing not everything is what it seems and not all that glitters is gold. So for young people, I think the most important thing is for a lot of us is to listen as well, because a lot of us also need to speak up because we've seen and we've read a lot. I mean, that's one of the key things that it comes with being young, is you become curious and you become frustrated, which I see with Generation Z a lot. They like to document and consistently say, hey, no, we saw this or we've looked up this, because one of the greatest things about this day and age is the internet and being able to look up information as fast as we can, because you can't do that 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you couldn't look up and say, oh, that's actually, a fallacy, or that's false or whatever. Nowadays, it's instant. You can say that's a false statement. You can say that that's a false understanding or whatever it may be. I think one of the biggest things with the younger generation, I would say, is that they're not given enough weight to their words because of their age, but their knowledge is vast because they're hungry to learn. And a lot of them are willing to get their voices out there. Not as coherently as one would like, but they're trying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're stalking that.
Good. So yeah, I would agree. The ability to have access to information like that is so different in the age that we're in now. I would also throw in the importance of learning how to filter through what's
Correct.
true from what's false out there, right?
Correct.
Last word. Anything else that you wanted to say?
Honestly, not really, man. To be quite honest with you, I mean, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here. And I'm curious, what made you pick me out of most of the people you've known? Because there's plenty of others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious on why.
I think you and I, we chatted for just a little bit before we started recording.
Mm-hmm.
And you've always been somebody willing to speak. And so I figured that you would share what you had experienced, what was on your heart. I knew it hadn't always been easy for you. And, we have a good relationship, though we haven't talked a lot in the last few years. You've always meant a lot to me as well. So you were one of the first that came to my mind.
I appreciate that.
You bet.
And I think for people that don't know, I mean, for as much disparities and hardships I went through, I really appreciate all the knowledge you gave me. Because, and this might seem weird to you, but you were one of the father figures I had growing up in a time where I didn't have one. And I appreciate that from you, sir.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure. And if you ever need anything, I'm here.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose.
Take it easy.
You too.
Bye.